Move, countermove, detect, prevent, and defense. Being a CISO is like waging a never-ending chess game against players you don't know, can't see, and attack without warning. On this podcast, cybersecurity experts from Zscaler's Office of the CISO have a pragmatic dialogue on cyber risks, current attacks, and security trends. Welcome to the CISO's Gambit. Hi, Brad Mollenhauer here for another edition of the CISO's Gambit. Danny Connolly, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Mark Lewick, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
And so whatever it was we were going to talk about has, of course, been superseded by the events of the last week. And of course, I am talking about the Colonial Pipeline incident. And Mark, I can imagine from the United Kingdom, that has drawn a few crikeys. And of course, the release of the presidential executive order. So, gentlemen, to get this session kicked off, obviously critical national infrastructure was involved here. So, open-ended question. Was this a targeted attack?
I'm going to step right in here, and I want to point out that this is opinion. I don't know anything, any secret sauce or any information about the motivation here, but it strikes me that this is like every other ransomware attack out there, and that they get a beachhead into an organization through phishing or some exposed device or anything like that, and once they are inside, they are looking for that which makes your business tick, that which will make you hurt. And if you happen to be running petroleum across the eastern seaboard, it's not a surprise to me that they're going to hit that if they can.
I'm not sure anyone could actually answer that question but the attackers themselves. The FBI attributed the attack to the DarkSide ransomware group, but they're obviously in it to make money. And the Colonial Pipeline generates a ton of money. Meaning a $5 million ransom payment is certainly a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money they're bringing in. We certainly know through TTPs used by DarkSide that they are known for exploiting vulnerabilities in publicly exposed services. That said, I agree with Mark. It was probably more of a target of opportunity, but not a targeted attack, which is much different.
That's a really great point, Danny. The DarkSide ransomware for hire group have specifically said, we're not going to target education. We're not going to target healthcare. We're not going to, we're no-go for these areas. From an understanding of what the impact of this may have had, they probably don't care or didn't know.
I guarantee they knew what Colonial Pipeline was for the United States. What they didn't know is that the pipeline would shut down as a precautionary measure. So the fact that this group was able to not only get a foothold, move laterally throughout the network in order to obtain important business information, encrypt, exfil that information, and then the owners of the pipeline, as a precaution, shut down the pipeline. How are the SCADA networks at risk from this? You can't let one foothold turn into a enterprise breach to the point where that would impact your SCADA systems and proactively shut them down. To me is really shocking. Like, this is considered U.S. critical infrastructure.
I agree. And the same is in play outside of the U.S. as well. Those same levels of attacks. The NHS here in the U.K. was crippled through a ransomware attack in NotPetya, as a matter of fact, several years ago. It does happen, and we know it happens. That is clearly an accident or an incidence of bycatch, where that was not what they were intending to attack. But the point here is that this was captured. This did happen. So no matter where you are in the world, critical national infrastructure does exist. And whether it's protected specifically or protected just because those are important businesses, it doesn't really matter. They're still possible for them to be targets.
Guys, that some excellent points there. And, something that's really, kind of that I'm giving thought to based upon listening to both of your perspectives on this is that, look, we know threat actors have become keen on leveraging ransomware for obvious reasons related to its output success with financial gain and the ability to use various intrusion vectors, which I think is fascinating after, kind of hearing your debate as to was this targeted or was it just, opportunistic, right? So, let's kind of generalize this a little bit and talk about some of the safeguards that organizations need to be considering to reduce their risk of a ransomware threat.
Thanks for that, Brad. I think it's a really important point to say that ransomware is the current bogeyman of the cybersecurity world, right? Or boogeyman if you're American again. And it is virulent and it is difficult to protect against because of what you just said, that there's more than one point of entry. There's more than one way of delivering that package. There's more than one way to actually get what you want. You don't have to just aim for one thing, but that doesn't mean we're defenseless. There are a series of basic security capabilities and controls that you can put in place that will drastically reduce the likelihood and the impact of a ransomware event.
So, Danny, after kind of, hearing what Mark said, and again, going back to, what I was giving thought to, where we've got these various intrusion vectors. So anything from, spear phishing campaigns to, exploits of commonly used in legacy technologies. Yes, I'm looking at you, VPN and RDP. What have you seen to kind of protect those specific channels?
So SCADA systems or ICS systems, OT devices, basically control levers, switches, sensors, manufacturing equipment, things that aren't typical computers. They're more relays and such that control things like the pipeline. Obviously segmenting those and ensuring they can't just communicate with the traditional business networks is what I've seen when I've inspected certain power administration sites.
Danny, I completely agree, but I want to say two things. One is that since the 90s, we've been driving more towards delivering all of our service capability over common networks. It's to say we shouldn't is great, and it's a wonderful message, and it's noble. But when we're all driving to reduce costs, the idea of having a person who's on site who can manage a piece of equipment and every site, it's just no longer really working. So there have been these economies to say, let's connect it to the internet. I'll give you an example of, maybe engines on boats or other pieces of important measuring machinery across multiple sites. Connecting them to the internet allows an organization to support many with one or small set of resources, and that has been an incredibly important driver. So there are these opposing forces. The force for security has been to say, let's keep these air gaps, let's keep these away. But the force for modernization and digitalization of our organizations has been pushing the opposite way. And in the gap between those two motions, ransomware has come and raised its ugly head.
There are ways to do it securely, right? So I've even seen organizations use hotspots or cell cards. Back in the old days, it used to be dedicated dial-up connections, right? Separate from that business network. But today, we're talking 2021, where we have a lot better technology than we did even 2 years ago, right? You have to keep it updated and evolve those legacy networks to modernize cybersecurity, and that concern.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head. And for me, I'm going to encapsulate everything you said by two little words that I both loathe and love, and those are zero trust. Zero trust, of course, can mean anything a technology vendor wants it to mean, but what I really want to get across, and the part I love about it, is it's a philosophy. And the philosophy that says, I do not trust a thing implicitly anymore. I want to move towards explicitly trusting things. If something is in my environment, does it have any more access than it needs? Do you understand the identity that's trying to drive that action? Zero trust as a philosophy suggests an assumed breach footprint, that you already assume that you're in your environment. And how do you array your controls and how do you manage your estate if you assume that they're already there, and it changes everything.
Spot on, old chap. I guess switching up to the executive order that was released on the 12th, you know, that executive order and the planning for how to improve the United States cybersecurity posture has been in progress for quite some time. But obviously with the Colonial Pipeline breach or ransomware event, that expedited it. And there's certain language within that executive order specific to not only government institutions, but also public and private companies. More importantly, the executive order in the definitions section has the term zero trust architecture and what it means, which I really, really liked. But it has all the key aspects. Assume that you're compromised. Eliminate implicit trust in any one element. Granular risk-based controls, security automation at all aspects of infrastructure.
Don't forget about some of the supply chain mandates that might be coming out of that as well. I think those are really important.
And it's not just the U.S. government who's starting to take things a bit seriously as well. The U.K. government this week just released an open consultation on the Computer Misuse Act of 1990. They are also seeking support and seeking information from the industry and from academia, et cetera, to figure out, does this law meet the needs of today? Does this law really enforce and help us against the cybersecurity threats we're meeting in 2021? It is a 30-year-old law.
Yeah. Well, fascinating perspective, both on, ransomware protections and, some of the recent orders that are coming out of, the United Kingdom and the United States. And Danny, thank you for that trip down memory lane where, talking about, industrial control systems with dedicated circuits. It just, I don't know, it conjectured up memories of a speakeasy DSL running a turbine. But, one final question here. And, Mark, you might have some perspective on this, but Danny, obviously you being, our federal guru within the greater group here. One of the things that I'm, trying to understand is, look, I know what the role of CISA is within, Homeland Security, but, correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, but I do not believe CISA was notified immediately from the Colonial Pipeline. What are your thoughts on that? And Mark, if you have some, you could certainly weigh in as well. Danny, why don't you?
We're a week later. I mean, it's shocking to me as well. We're a week in, and we don't have the specific vector used or any real details or attack timeline, right? And that's critical. Not only the threat intel sharing, meaning what IOCs were used that could help other entities, search their environment to see if they're also breached, but more importantly of like just the initial vector, right? You see different rumors going around of, hey, there could have been a RDP service exposed to the internet, or could be a phishing attack with a picture of bikinis that somebody clicked on that led to the initial foothold. And the fact that we don't know is a problem, especially since CISA is the cybersecurity arm of the United States government. It has dedicated experts that as a part of their mission are hunt. They have a hunt team or a hurt team, as they call them, and they come in and they help you respond and deal with this kind of incident. So,
right. They seem to me to be, the preeminent incident handlers, if you will, for the federal government. So yeah, I found that quite astonishing myself.
So Danny, I got to translate this for my own environment here. But I do think that what we're really talking about is mandatory notification law. I am also aware that in the U.S. it's far more complicated. The FBI has a cybersecurity wing. The CISA has a security wing. And NSA has a cybersecurity wing. Everybody's fighting in there, but that's all kind of friendly. Over here we have the NCSC, and that's part of GCHQ, and we have a lot of letters in that sentence. But the point here is that mandatory notification has to be streamlined, has to be made simpler. It is not as it used to be in the late 90s and through the 2000s, where everyone thought to hide evidence of a breach from their market, from their competitors, from everyone that and I think it's a human nature. We want to hide something bad happened to us, and we go into the corner. We are all interdependent parts of the larger economy, and cybersecurity is not a specific problem for one industry. It is across industries, and we are only going to get better at this if we all have the information and learn from it as quickly as possible. And I think that we need to move towards more clear notification rules.
And that's where the executive order that was released on the 12th, Section 2 is removing barriers to sharing threat information. It includes IT, OT service providers, it includes cloud. It covers everything to include government and specific private entities, such as Colonial Pipeline. And I have a feeling that CISA not being notified in a timely manner in this instance certainly drove some of that language in the executive order.
Okay, gentlemen, and that is bringing us near the conclusion of this episode of the CISO's Gambit. But before we depart, Danny, any final words?
Just a few things. Next week we're going to have 2 special guest speakers for our podcast episode. We're going to actually go a little deeper with the Threat Labs report that was released yesterday, which is fascinating, on double extortion, ransomware events. And coming in June, we have CISA TIC program manager Sean Conley joining us to talk about TIC 3.0 and kind of the game-changing aspects of that.
Gentlemen, fascinating perspective as always. And that will conclude this episode of the CISO's Gambit. Until next time, thank you, listener. Thanks for listening to the CISO's Gambit with Brad Moldenhauer and Danny Connolly. Check back with your podcast provider regularly for more episodes. Brad and Danny are both CISOs at Zscaler. You can find their profiles on LinkedIn or reach out to them and other CXO transformation leaders in the Zscaler CXO community LinkedIn group. Zscaler is a zero trust exchange cloud security provider for some of the largest companies on the Forbes Global 2000. Find out more about Zscaler at zscaler.com. Copyright 2021.